Hi there, and welcome to BlackScarabFilmZ Presents. Today, however, I'm going to be handing the show over to a colleague of mine. Because it's just about the time to get into that spooky season, you're going to be treated to a collection of interesting trivia regarding some of the most notable horror authors around. Or at the very least, the ones that are most notable to me. I hope you enjoy. Salutations and welcome to the show. I'm your host, the Classic Novelist. When the weather starts to turn cooler and the leaves change, you might want to curl up in a blanket with a cup of warm cider. But you should always beware what ghouls and ghosts lurk in the darkness. Because this season of All Hallows Eve is upon us, I'm going to regale you with some interesting tidbits about some of your favorite horror icons. For example, did you know that Bram Stoker had a rivalry with Oscar Wilde? That might be surprising, but the reason for the feud might be even more shocking. It was over a woman. Seriously. Florence Balcombe married Bram Stoker in 1878, but years earlier, one of her suitors was none other than Oscar Wilde.
Nosferatu!
You might remember Nosferatu from a rather famous episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, and interesting fact, the vampire's name is actually Count Orlok, and Nosferatu just means vampire in Romanian. But did you know that the 1922 German horror classic was an unauthorized adaptation of Dracula? Another fact about Florence Balcombe is that she was the literary executor of Stoker's estate, and was never asked or paid for the usage of elements that were quite obviously lifted from the original novel, and tried to sue the film out of existence, demanding that all prints of the film be destroyed. While the lawsuit was successful, prints of the film started to surface in America following the ruling, to the delight of film historians and SpongeBob fans everywhere. Edgar Allan Poe is a horror icon, but did you know that he was the inspiration for a work by Jules Verne? Poe tended to stick to short stories, with the exception of a proto-sci-fi novel named The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. And Verne's 1878 work, An Antarctic Mystery, was an early version of fan fiction, being a sequel to Poe's novel. So if anyone ever tells you that fan fiction isn't real writing, point their attention over to one of the most famous authors of all time, who did it because he enjoyed Poe's story so much and wanted to see it continue.
Groucho, I'd like to have you talk to Arlene de Fraya, and her partner is a special guest, a visitor from the Middle East, Prince Kahir Allah. So, if you would please, and meet Groucho Marx.
Welcome to the show.
While he's well known today for writing The Exorcist and its sequel Legion, William Peter Blatty once went on the comedy quiz show You Bet Your Life, hosted by Groucho Marx, and posed as an Arab prince with more wives than he can remember, before revealing that he was faking it because the show's producer, George Fenneman, had told Blatty that Groucho was the foremost authority on spotting phonies, and he wanted to test the theory. He ended up winning a lot of money during the game, and used it to allow him the free time to write a novel. That novel was, of course, The Exorcist. Speaking of The Exorcist, did you know that the entire plot was based off a real incident that occurred in 1949? Obviously, the real child, Roland Doe, wasn't actually possessed. It's been theorized that he either had an untreated neurological disorder or was faking it, but he started exhibiting weird behavior after using a Ouija board, and it eventually got so bad that the church recommended an exorcism, both elements that Blatty would lift for his novel. Did you know that Stephen King used to write novels under a pseudonym? Back when King's writing career started, it was frowned upon for writers to publish more than one book a year, for reasons that not even King himself understood. But as you likely know, King is a very quick writer, as his bibliography suggests. So he convinced Signet Books to allow him to use an alias to publish additional books. They went along with it, and King used the name Richard Bachman to write several novels, starting with 1977's Rage, creating an entire backstory for Bachman, including service in the Coast Guard, losing a child to a drowning accident, and even putting in a fake author's photo, which was actually the insurance agent of King's literary agent. Eventually, because fans are obsessive, people figured out who Bachman really was, and King stopped using it because now he can release as many books a year as he wants under his real name, so he didn't need Bachman anymore.
You're here about the apartment.
Yes.
Didn't we meet this morning? You're,
West. Herbert West.
Did you know that H.P. Lovecraft, despite creating arguably one of the most enduring mythoses in Cthulhu, and writing the story that was the basis for the long-running cult franchise in Herbert West Re-animator, he went largely unrecognized in his time? Lovecraft mainly got his income from an inheritance that was mostly spent by the time he died in 1937. Despite that, Joyce Carol Oates believes that he exerted an incalculable influence on succeeding generations of writers of horror fiction. And Stephen King, in his autobiographical novel Danse Macabre, credited Lovecraft with influencing his interest in writing horror, and has stated that Lovecraft was the 20th century's greatest practitioner of the classic horror tale. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that Lovecraft once owned a cat with a wildly offensive name that I won't repeat here because, no. Did you know that the genre of science fiction was created by a teenage girl? While there's a bit of gray area, it was stated by Brian Aldiss in his 1973 work, Billion Year Spree, that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, written when she was just 18 and published 2 years later, was the first seminal work to which the label sci-fi can logically be attached. Percy Bysshe Shelley, husband of Mary Shelley, drowned to death after his boat was caught in a storm in 1822 and was cremated. Allegedly, Percy's heart was so calcified due to tuberculosis that he had suffered from earlier in life that it refused to burn and was kept as a keepsake by Mary Shelley, who carried it with her everywhere until she buried it with her son in 1889. Knowledge is knowing that Frankenstein's monster is a character within the DC universe, having first appeared in Detective Comics number 135 in 1948, and has appeared regularly over the past 70-plus years. But wisdom is knowing that Mary Shelley herself is also part of a shared pop culture universe, because she appeared as a companion of the Eighth Doctor in several Big Finish Productions audio dramas. Did you also know that Mary Shelley's mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, widely known as one of the first feminist writers? You may know that, but did you know that Shelley spent a lot of time at her mother's grave, so much so that she reportedly lost her virginity to Percy Bysshe Shelley there? There's really no topping that. I hope you found these facts to be as eye-opening and hair-raising as I did. Until next time. Ooh! Interesting, huh? Well, come back next time. See you then.